Welcome to the next part in this series where we will be looking at traditional publishing. Hello writers, it's Mia. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am speaking to Terry Morris from Pan Macmillan South Africa. As I said in the previous weeks, we have spoken about what happens after you have typed the wonderful words "the end" on your manuscript. So we have spoken about manuscript appraisals, we have spoken about editing, proofreading, and then now the big decision, should you self-publish or traditionally publish? Terry, I'm so excited and so pleased that you could join us. Could you please tell us a bit more about yourself and about Pan Macmillan South Africa?
Sure. It's lovely to be here. Hi, writers. You are the heart of our business, so a very important part of our conversation and what we do. I am part of the furniture at Pan Macmillan. I've been here for almost 24 years this year, and it's been an incredible journey. I feel privileged to be in the industry I'm in, to be in the position I'm in, because I come to work every day doing things that I love, working with words and authors and an incredible team who feel the same way. I think what's been so exciting over the last while is seeing our local publishing really thrive, grow. It's incredibly diverse. We are now doing, children's books right through to adults, non-fiction, fiction. And it's been a wonderful journey, which we started in 2004. So it's been a while, and it is a slog, and there's some heartbreak along the way. But especially when you walk into a warehouse full of returns, which is every publisher needs to go on a warehouse visit once a year. But it really has been remarkable, and it feels like these are colleagues and friends, and the books become so much a part of who we are. We are an international company, so about anywhere between 70 and 80% of our books are imported. We do a wide range of children's books, brand fiction, literary fiction, award-winning novels, and then our local lists, which we're incredibly proud of. And Trevor Noah has just won a big South African Book Award, which was voted for by the booksellers as their favorite book to publish last year, which was wonderful.
Congratulations. Terry, okay, so I'm just going to, if I am a South African writer, I have a manuscript, what do I do?
When you say, I liked your comments, when you've written the end on the manuscript, what do? Well, you go back to the beginning is my advice, and you re-edit and you rework and you look at your work and what you've written with fresh eyes, and edit yourself before you pass on to anyone else. One of our authors, Jeffrey Archer, who was hosted by Writer a while ago, I think he gets to draft 15 before he hands it over to the publisher. And I think sometimes we, certainly in our submission period, we see some books that have such a wonderful kernel of an idea, but the writing is just not there. And you can see that people have written a manuscript and submitted, and there's very little kind of rework. So that's my first step, is be self-critical, go through it, rework your manuscript. Read, make sure you know what's out there, make sure you know what else, what the kind of industry gold standard is that you're trying to achieve through your writing. So those are the two bits I would say first and foremost. And then it's really, again, not the end, it's the beginning, because you have to get out there and you have to see who is doing what, which publishing companies are accepting submissions, who is your intended market, who do you envisage reading your book. Try and make comparisons. You're in a marketing space and a sales space, and it is a commercial venture. So we often like to say, it's it's Jojo Moyes meets so and so, and when you're trying to sell it to your sales team or your media for PR, it's about how you sell your book throughout the process. So go onto the various websites of the publishers, the local publishers, see who's accepting what, see what they're publishing, who you think your book may fit in with. approach agents internationally if it has more international appeal. Those are the first avenues to try. And it is very acceptable within the industry to submit to a range of publishers at the same time. You maybe just want to let the publisher know, I have submitted this to a number of other publishers, but we really don't expect you to wait for a reply from one before you go to the other. So submit widely, broadly, take the feedback on board. Some of it may be brutal, but it's important to take on board all the feedback that you get. It is a very tough environment. I won't put on any rose-tinted glasses here. It's a tough environment. It's a small market. It's a tough market where we have a low number of book buyers. That's partly economic, and it's partly access to books or a reading culture. And so if there is interest from a publisher, you should take it seriously, and you should feel that it's a very positive step in the right direction. You may get 20 rejection letters. Keep them in a bottom drawer. They've been some famous
it's a badge of honor. It is a badge of honor. We wear them with pride.
Wear it with pride, and you can always go back when you hit that 1 million copy mark. So submit widely and broadly. If you feel you've come to the end of the road, maybe that's the time, certainly for fiction, that there are many other avenues. There is self-publishing, and we can talk about that a little bit more. There are the platforms like Amazon or other digital platforms where they're not huge outlays, where you can access audiences and sort of get to a different market. So that is the beauty about it. I mean, of course, I will speak highly of publishers and what they bring to the party, but that is certainly not the only way to get your book out.
Okay, no, great. I love that you said to submit to multiple publishers, because that's something that's still very prevalent all over, is that, you know, you have to submit to one at a time and wait. And then it's like, you know, anything from 6 to sometimes 14 weeks that you're sitting there twiddling your thumbs waiting for either the form letter or anything like that. So that's great. Thank you so much. I'm going to tell everyone. My other question is just, when would you recommend for a South African author to approach an international publisher as opposed to a South African publisher?
It's a tough one, and if we thought the South African market was tough, an international market is even tougher, because if you think about an editor sitting in the US, and let's take literary fiction, for example, as a start. They are looking for new voices, different voices, unique writing, and they are looking at books from a range of literary agents, literary scouts, different territories. There's India, Australia, you know, countries in the East, South America, everywhere. So you know, Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, who have really come forward onto the literary scene. So you're up against all of those kind of books, first and foremost. It's tough. Commercial fiction, where publishers internationally are trying to build brands, often it's about where the author is based. Can they get to the book fairs? Can they do these multiple city tours? That's certainly in the US and the UK. I'll speak a little bit about one of our authors, James Hendry, who actually has done very well in the US market. And that's
very funny.
Yeah. And he's done well locally, but also in America, and he continues to do well with his ebooks because he has this platform, and there is a market there that he can access. So it is very much about creating platforms, creating markets, understanding how to market yourself. What are your unique selling points going into a market? It can't only be this one manuscript you've got. Have you got other ideas if you're a commercial fiction writer? Do you have a pipeline? Will you be able to produce a book a year? Those are all the kind of considerations that the major publishers will look at. But I would say there's no harm in approaching some of the international agents. If you're looking to crack the international markets, you will need to go through a literary agent. And so you should submit to those agents who are accepting submissions.
We spoke about that earlier, that South Africa has a bit of a unique situation, is that as a writer, you can approach the publisher directly, whereas in other markets, you actually approach the agent has the relationship with the publisher. Is there a reason for that?
Historically, it's been because the South African market is just not big enough to support an agent network. Whereas in the UK and the US, you're dealing with multiple publishers. They are dealing in translation rights. It's a much bigger ecosystem. Right. That being said, I would say over the past 2-3 years, there's been a rise of local agents who are not only looking at the literary space, but also the film space, looking at selling those translation rights. And that's been a wonderful development within the market. They are few and far between, but they are doing a great job. And the local publishers will still have submission periods. There's a lot of commissioning. It's a small market, so we can phone up an author, phone up someone with a good platform and say, have you thought about a book? Whereas in the US, there are often many gateways and doors and people to navigate.
Okay, yeah. You were speaking about translated works. What advice do you have for a writer who doesn't write in English? Because we just sit with, I teach so many students who they're not mother tongue English speakers, and I know how hard it is to write in a language other than your home language. And what do you recommend? Because what kind of market are we looking at? What do I do if I have I know there are specifically Afrikaans publishers. There are some writers who specialize in South Africa, in African or South African languages. What would you tell a writer?
So I guess the publishing industry, we haven't done ourselves a great, well, we haven't serviced the market very well in terms of languages. Traditionally, languages outside of English and Afrikaans, Zulu and isiXhosa in the kids area have been represented to a degree. But generally, it's been an area where educational publishers are working, and it's schools and libraries, and that's partly just a commercial retail sense of the market. But that being said, there are a plethora of small independent publishers that have are working in some are area specific, some are language specific. Often they are very close to the market or the readership, and are publishing across different languages. And not all of them are members of the Publishers Association. But for example, the South African Book Fair that was run virtually a few weeks ago had a whole marketplace where they supported small to medium sized publishers across language groups, across areas. And those people were able to sort of have a virtual marketplace where they were showcasing their books. And so it's important to find out from kind of industry websites, industry events like the South African Book Fair, who are those publishers and what are they doing? And they are often the publishers who are not only selling into those markets, but also submitting to the education departments in various languages. And there are many tiers. There's first language, first additional language, second additional language, often looking for set work books. And those publishers do have editors working and reading across the various languages. The trade publishers, the big trade publishers, we just don't have the capacity. And because we're not getting into those educational markets, we just don't have the underpinning. So at the moment, we accept submissions in English for our adult titles. And in the kids area, we would probably, we are accepting a few other languages, but still it's a tough market. But it's about doing the research and making sure you really understand what's happening in each territory and each province.
Okay, cool. I'm so excited about the kids stuff because I adore children's books, and it's a lovely course for me to teach when we teach how to write for children. But I think I have the biggest collection of children's books, which, I have 2 children, but they don't qualify for children's books anymore. So I'm so excited to hear more about all the South African children's books coming out. It's very, very exciting. Okay. One of the other things, can I ask you, what do we do in terms of money? Okay, with self-publishing, you can say, I'm going to spend X amount on a book, and I can sell it for X amount, that's what I get returned. But with traditional publishing, it's a lot of that happens behind the scenes, and I think not everyone really wants to share numbers and give us stuff. So it would be awesome just to get some feedback. What does an author look at in terms of income?
So I'm going to start just by quickly mapping out the difference, the financial models between self-publishing and traditional publishing, because I think it's important to go in sort of eyes wide open. And that I'm not prescriptive about what's better, because actually often self-publishing is a better avenue to go. What happens in traditional publishing is the publisher, it's a bit like we're the venture capitalist, and we are putting up the money for each project. So the publisher in traditional publishing model takes on all the risk. We pay the editing, the typesetting, the proofreading, the jacket design, so all those pre-press costs, we call it, and then the print cost. Those are the obvious costs that come into a book. And then over and above that, there is the warehousing, the distribution of the books, the sales to books, to the booksellers, the marketing and publicity that goes on around it. We allocate a budget to each book for the publicity and marketing, and then all of our overheads, which includes kind of systems and distribution. And the unseen factor in each book is the risk that we take on stock write-down or stock obsolescence. And that's a very real risk that comes with each project. So when people complain about how low the royalties are, and it often comes up, it's because there's this very big base that the publisher takes on and the risk that the publisher takes on. The more copies that are sold, the better for the author and obviously for the publisher. So if I take a book that is 200 Rand, for example, and that's the recommended retail price. Not all retailers will stick to that. Some will be a bit above, some will be a bit below. But we will pull out a book at a recommended retail price. If that book is 200 Rand, don't forget 15% of that is VAT. So you're left with 174 Rand. Of that 174 Rand, let's say on average, the bookseller, we give a discount to the bookseller. And that discount is about anywhere between 40 and 50%. So you're left with 87 Rand is what the publisher gets per book. Of that 87 Rand, about 12% is the average royalty we see in the market. And so the author is getting 10 Rand for every book sold. But don't forget, the publisher is putting, each book will have a unit cost allocated to it. That is the pre-press, the print, and then the distribution and the marketing fee that goes on it, on top of that. So you can see that is for the print book. Ebook sales are generally the accepted, or the average royalty on an ebook is 25% for an author. And audio is not huge in South Africa yet. It's sort of slowly getting there. The audio is anywhere between 15 and 20%. So you can see it's a slog on all levels. It's often a labor of love. And that's really where we are. A lot of publishers will also have escalation clauses. So if you hit a certain amount of books, your royalties will increase thereafter, which encourages the author to also really get stuck in terms of the sales and promoting it. So that's that model. Self-publishing, there are various hybrid models. Some are ebook only, which is obviously much cheaper. You don't have the stock risk, but then you're not in the bookstores. And sometimes in self-publishing, the author will have to put up an amount that covers all those pre-press costs and the print costs. So it's quite a big capital outlay. And then you have to sell those books. There are some booksellers will deal directly with self-published authors. If you have your own platforms and your own kind of speaking circuits, sometimes you can sell directly to those people. But you do need to do your numbers, and you need to go in really fully understanding the different scenarios, because you could print 1,000 books and sit with a garage full of books for the next 5 years. So it really is important to weigh up the pros and cons for your particular kind of book, and who you think your reader is, and your reach.
Yeah. You mentioned that sometimes you would also agree that self-publishing would be a better route for an author. Is there a criteria? What would you say? I mean, does it have to do with your market? Does it have to do with your audience, the kind of book, the niche you're writing in? What would you say?
It's often the kind of book and the market. So, for example, if someone is on the speakers circuit and has a very big platform, and let's take for example a church group, and or a ministry or something like that, and someone is going every week to a different ministry, and they are preaching, or they have a platform of 300-400 people, and those people are really interested in what this person has to say, and you come along and you set up a little bookstore and you sell your books there. That's often a model we see. Or, for example, someone does corporate training and lecturing, and they have a very broad base of clients, and they are giving lectures, and the book becomes a bit of a calling card almost. So they can get a corporate to buy a certain number of copies whenever they're doing a talk. And that's often quite an easy way then to sell. You're known to these corporates, you're known in the speaking world, but you may not be known in a bookstore, and a retailer may only take 2 or 3 copies of your book. But actually, you can go out there and sell more. And sometimes that's you kind of want both, and that's often what a traditional publisher will try and cover both of those.
Okay.
But yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No. So many things to consider, and it's just like it gets overwhelming. Just quickly, so I had a question about advances versus royalties. When do you do what?
So in advance, I always see it as having 2 functions. One is it's a commitment from the publisher to say, we believe in this book, we are putting this amount down. Often internationally, there's an auction that happens, and publishers are bidding against each other with an agent, and the advance becomes very important then, because it's how you secure the book. I think what happens with non-fiction projects is often an author is getting a publishing agreement or signing up. They still haven't actually written the book yet. There's a lot of research that happens. They put in a proposal and 3 chapters, and actually that book will only be delivered in 8 or 9 months. And so the advance, in a way, is it's a form of a cash advance that helps an author during that process. When maybe they are taking time off work or not working, and the advance plugs that to a degree. And I'll talk a little bit about the level of advances. But I think it's important to remember that an advance is an advance against royalties. It's not in addition to the royalties. So you might get a 10,000 Rand advance, and you will only start earning royalties on the book once that advance has been earned out. So essentially, it's just when the cash is being paid to a degree, and some books will never earn out the advance, which is in favor of the author.
Oh, the nerves.
Advances in South Africa are quite low compared to international standards, and that's because of the units that we sell in this country. It's a small market. And so the risk is just too large for a publisher to put out these enormous advances that they may never earn out on the royalty side. And so we always say to our authors, do not give up your day job. Because it's a tough gig out there. Certainly,
I start all my classes like that. Don't quit.
Writing for a South African market, don't give up your day job.
Okay. All right. No, great stuff. Just in terms of South African markets, what are our numbers? What do we look at lately? Like, what is considered a bestseller in South Africa?
It fluctuates, but and it depends on the tier. You will get your big current affairs, political books can still sell, well over 20,000 copies, 10, 20,000 copies. But that's often a big story, a big author. I mean, the Trevor Noah is an example, you know, across the different editions sold over 100,000 copies. A brand fiction author will probably sell anywhere over, a well-known fiction author, you'd hope to get to 5,000 copies and more and up. Literary fiction is the toughest space because you are essentially, each book is almost like a debut and you're really trying to break it in, and we don't have that award landscape that we used to have, where you can really books can sort of stand out because they're winning awards and literary awards. So literary fiction is tough, and it is, you know, if you sell 1,500 of a literary fiction novel that's in print, that's quite significant. Okay. But commercial fiction is a lot easier, just depending on the book and the audience, of course. But these days we say anything over 3,000, you'll get into the bestseller charts.
Okay. Just quickly, can you give me a comparison of literary fiction versus commercial fiction? Because that's sometimes, you know, where our writers and the students kind of get stuck, you know, when is it literary and when is it commercial? Yeah.
So commercial fiction is, I don't want to use this word, I'm using the word formulaic because there is a certain kind of formula. It's plot driven, it's very heavily plot driven. There are kind of expectations of a character, whether it's a thriller, and you'll see that even more so internationally, where they say, you didn't kind of follow this device. So thrillers, romance, commercial fiction, women's fiction, book club, and I say that, so for example, like Jojo Moyes or Marion Keyes are considered commercial fiction. There's a narrative arc, it's very clear. You know, you know what you're going to get out of it. Literary fiction is often a little more, it can be more experimental. It's often very much character driven or place driven. It's often got kind of underlying themes that can be teased out. It's the writing in literary fiction should be extraordinary. It really, a lot of it is about the writing. That being said, what's happened more recently is the lines have blurred a little bit. So where you are getting much more diverse writing from different places, it's often seen as more literary fiction, whereas I would see it still as a great read that just brings everything that you would expect from a commercial novel. So an example, I think, is someone like Abidare, who is a Nigerian author who wrote The Girl with the Louding Voice. It's a great book. It's quite commercial because it's the characters are just very the characters and the plot are what you would expect out of commercial. But it's being framed more and more as a literary novel or slight literary novel because it's unusual. It comes from, it covers different territory, different traditions. You're learning about cultures. So it's not, I think sometimes it's an industry term that we get a little bit hung up about. And for a writer, it's much more about who are you trying to write for and who would you compare your book to if you were to compare to other authors. That's often more helpful than trying to say commercial or literary.
Yeah. No, I asked that because it's a question students often ask me, what do I mean by this or what do I mean by that? And then it's exactly that same, like, well, it depends on this and that and stuff like that. So yeah. It's an interesting way that we develop our words that we use. Okay. Okay, can I just quickly, so we spoke about the money. In terms of contracts, okay, so for example, let's say you guys do decide, I'm still my happy little South African author and I've got my beautiful manuscript, and you guys do decide to proceed with the manuscript. What happens next? Contracts, are there still rewrites at that point? Are there still, what kind of editing takes place then? So what happens once you've said, yes, let's do this?
So once we said, yes, let's do this, we will generally team up the author with an editor. And we have a range of editors who work on different projects, and we try and team up an editor who we feel will work closely with the author and work well, and who also has experience in that kind of a book, whether it's non-fiction, fiction. We will give broad feedback from our local publishing team, much more kind of structural feedback on the novel, but the editor will really get in there with the work and sort of wrangle with the text, come back with a lot of feedback, and from there it's a bit of a backwards and forwards with the author. So there's a discussion, there's some, I take on board that, I need to rewrite this, the editor suggested we cut here. What's important about a good editor is that they will never lose the voice of the writer, they will enhance it. But sometimes the writer, you have to kill your darlings, and it's about...
We don't like that.
Writers don't like that, but sometimes it is. You know, you're wedded to that paragraph because you think it flows so beautifully, but actually it brings nothing to the text, and the editor will come with a very incisive eye. So the editor comes in, works with the author. That, you know, it really depends. It could take a few months, a month, 2 months. If the manuscript has been completed ahead of the, you know, once you've signed the contract. And then it still goes to proofreading stage, where a proofreader will come in and do the grammar and the spelling and the line flow and all of that. In the process, while that is happening, we are briefing our jacket designers. We are doing all the sort of background work with the sales teams and the marketing teams and the publicity teams to make sure that the book is, all the sort of commercial decision making and preparation is happening in the back end, while this is happening with the author and the editor and the proofreader. Once the book has been proofread, it will go to typesetting. It'll go to typesetting. Again, it'll go back to the author and our local publishing team, and they'll just double check. And sometimes there are a few snags that have happened there. And once it's been typeset, by that stage, we will have all the marketing material done. We will have the cover designs done well ahead of that. It'll go to print. And then it's from print, it is about 4 weeks until it gets into the stores.
Okay. So how long is this process almost entirely, from when you say yes to where you install?
You know, because we work into a schedule, and because we have kind of slots where we think things will work at different times of the year, it could be anything from 18 months to 6 months. It really just depends. You know, a first-time author is unlikely to be published in that very busy Christmas period because you're up against every other major big book. So then we'll push it out to the following year, March. So it really also depends on commercial decision making. Also, we have a sell-in lead time of almost anywhere between 4 to 6 months. So we need to make sure that we have all the material and a finished manuscript 4 to 5 months ahead of that book being published, so that we can sell it into the retailers and put it up for any of the big promotions.
Okay.
And that's quite a short time period. In the UK, they often have 18 months to 2 year lead times on some of this stuff.
Okay. Oh, long stuff. Okay. In your editorial process, okay, when you say the editor is going to make decisions, going to say, let's move this, let's go that, how much say does the writer have in that per se? Okay, like for example, you know, obviously if it's big changes, small changes, how, you know, can the author say, no, I don't think we should do this? How much leeway do you have, or how much?
So it's a conversation, and generally what you'll find is if a writer approaches the editing process, really understanding that the editor's job is to enhance the book and make it the best book it can be, it's often an easier, smoother process. That being said, an editor does come with their own thoughts and views, and they will say, I didn't agree with this character. And the writer can sort of maybe justify it and say, no, this is why I've done that, and I feel very strongly about that. And it's a two-way discussion. So the writer will generally have the last say. That being said, on a non-fiction project, where there are any libel or defamation issues.
Okay.
If we've had a legal read and the lawyers are coming back saying that is potentially defamatory, and unless you can reword it or give us the documents and proof to substantiate those claims, we suggest you take it out. At that point, as a publisher, we will probably say, look, we defer to the legal opinion, and we suggest you take it out. If an author will not take it out, it could mean that we are unable to publish the book, or the author takes on the full risk of the libel or defamation around that. Okay. It very rarely happens. It very rarely happens, but it's because our defamation law is also quite, it'll err on the side of the writer. But it's important in some of these cases to have very tight legal opinion. That's non-fiction, generally the politics and the current affairs.
See, but that's another behind the scenes cost that we don't always anticipate. So,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No. So many things to think about. Okay. Contractually, once you sign a contract with a new author, what kind of things should an author look out for? Watch out for? What is industry standard? What is not? What would you recommend at that point?
You know, there are a few author bodies that I suggest an author gets onto a website or double checks, something like ANFASA, which is the a Non-Fiction Authors Association in South Africa, and they do give quite good advice on contracts. Mm-hmm. I think on the internet there are quite a lot of standard, or there's some very good articles about what an author should look out for in a contract. Most of the clauses are quite standard internationally. I think what's important is what we always aim, what is the territory that the publisher is signing up for? Is it world rights? And does that include world English rights, world rights in all languages? Is the territory just Southern Africa, for example? We will often just sign up Southern Africa, which means that it's important to then make sure that those rights are adhered to in the digital space as well. So territorial rights are very important if you are going to be signing up digital rights. Royalty clauses are important. Does it state print books, ebooks, audiobooks, any other formats that are we don't know they exist yet? That's quite important. Also, that an author, I think what's most important is that an author reads a contract and feels they can question the publisher or ask questions about any part of it. They are quite daunting. A lot of them are very standard in any contractual arrangement. So the warranties and indemnities section often terrifies authors until you sit and you unpack it and you explain actually what it means. It's far less terrifying.
And why it's there.
Important. Yeah. It's also important for a publisher to have a contract because we need to protect ourselves against an author. I mean, it hasn't happened, but you never know. An author who arrives with a book that is plagiarized or where they have actually lifted sections of books that exist already. And so the author is guaranteeing to a publisher that this is an original work. And so there are guarantees from the publisher side to the author and from the author to the publisher. And it is worthwhile sitting with the publisher and saying, can I just have an hour or so to just go through this contract with you if it all feels like Greek to you, because a lot of it is legalese, and when you unpack it, it benefits both parties.
Plain language. Well, we need plain language. That's what we do.
That I wish authors would ask. It's funny you say that, because often at the book fairs, there are often sessions that are about how to get published or and actually those are the best attended sessions. The questions are engaging and robust. So I have to be honest, I don't think I've ever been to a session where a very vast array of questions have been asked. I think it's not so much what questions I would ask, it's more that I would really encourage writers and potential writers to go out there to make sure you are reading widely, that you are reading widely for that group who you see as your audience. You know what they like, that you are on those platforms listening to authors on podcasts, that you really kind of understand the space you operate in. And I say this with all due respect, I see it on the children's side, that you often have people thinking, I can write a kid's book. I've told my kid these great bedtime stories and they love them, so therefore I have a book and a series and I've got some great illustrations. But they're not engaging with the books that are in the market. And often the books that are in the market, these are people who have given up their lives to be authors. They are slogging at it day after day, really understanding the children, the voices. And so sometimes I feel there's a little bit of disrespect coming in to very established, well-known authors who ply their trade, who really give it all. And someone comes in and says, I can't believe, these people turned down my manuscript because my children loved the book and, it's great and it's got morals and this and that. And actually, if you see what a tough environment it is for existing authors, or if you just sometimes just kind of read much more broadly and widely in those areas, that's often the first base before you even get to approach a publisher.
No, I mean, I see it with the appraisals that I do. Most of the time, when the least successful books I have are the children's books, and it's because it is quite a difficult thing to wrap your head around. I mean, what's the quote that says, "Writing for children is exactly the same as writing for adults, only much harder." So it's such a difficult thing to explain to the writer. So most of the time I start typing up the documents and I go, listen, I need to talk to you now. And then we have to have a face-to-face conversation so you can explain to them how it differs and how it is. But like you said, it's not easy, but I'm so excited you guys are publishing them.
It is wonderful. I mean, so many of the manuscripts we get are animal stories told from the perspective of an animal, because often it's easier to sort of get your head around that than actually spending time with a 10-year-old and 8-year-old. What do they find funny? How do they speak to each other? What are their likes and dislikes? What drives them mad about their parents? It's much harder sometimes to spend time and get those nuances. And I look at authors like international authors like Diary of, books like Diary of a Wimpy Kid or Andy Griffith's Treehouse series. They are getting into the heads of these kids, and that's where the success lies. So it's sometimes just looking at things from a different perspective.
Yeah, no, it's magic. I love children's stories, so they're fantastic. What, as a South African author, can we expect from Macmillan in the upcoming year? What should we be looking for? Are you guys aiming for something specific? Give us some tips and insider information so that we know what to submit.
Sure. So we have been beavering away during COVID. Although bookstores were closed for a long time and book sales have been affected by airport closures or a drop in retail footprint, we have been very busy getting manuscripts ready and signing up new books. And the good news is that a lot of people spent COVID time writing, so there's a lot coming out. Very exciting, and actually she comes originally from one of the writers' courses that Amanda ran, was Angela Mccalla. His first book, Red Ink, was workshopped with writer, and so we've got her new one coming out, Critical but Stable. And the amazing news is Angela last year was shortlisted for a comedy in writing, in women's writing, and a huge international award because she was published by Bloomsbury in the UK, her book, The Blessed Girl. So Angela's book, we just published Sue and Yati, A Family Affair, a fantastic family saga set up in Bulawayo, so that's on the fiction side. We have got most of our non-fiction is released. We just published Dikgang Moseneke's judicial memoir, Mandy Wiener's remarkable book, The Whistleblowers, which is incredible. We've got some great business books, Pablo Fatides. We just published Bruce Whitfield's book, The Upside of Down. For next year, we've got some some wonderful repeat authors or authors who are coming in with their second, third, fourth books, some fiction, non-fiction. We've got, we always do a lot of non-fiction. And I'm trying to think, my head is so far into 2021. But, we'll be making some announcements, but also some exciting non-fiction and adaptations. We're working with Dr. Tlaleng Mofokeng. She wrote a book called A Guide to Sexual Health and Pleasure, and we are doing a younger readers edition. So we're having lots of fun. We've just published a wonderful kids picture book by Rafilwe Mohloli in 3 languages. We've got some great new Yaku Jacobs books. Zelda Bezuidenhout, a wonderful book for teens. So just a plethora of books, and local publishing certainly on the up.
That's fantastic. Yeah, so I'm hoping it is, because you hear so many doom and gloom stories about publishers and everything that it really feels like, what should you be doing with your books? But yeah, you've definitely given us some insight and some hope. So that's wonderful. Okay. But thank you. Yeah, I think those are my questions I wanted to ask. Is there anything else that you want to add? What else would you like to say? What would you like writers to know?
Just keep writing and reading, and we will grow this market, and we will still be here. Books have survived so many technological and industrial revolutions, and so I really, which reminds me of Professor Mawala's book on the 4th Industrial Revolution we've just published. But I think books will be around for many years. We need writers, we need readers. So please continue.
Okay. Thank you so much, Terry. I'm so pleased you could join us. So thank you very, very much.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, writers. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask.